Certainly not at first. Some of the stuff I'm going to say, it's like it won't feel like that at all because it's so not, like you're not used to it. That's all. Sometimes something that is actually easier does not seem easier because it's not what I'm used to. Can we all agree, right? That if I'm not used to it, it may seem like a harder way. But I was talking about that whole thing about having beginnings where we don't have to commit to lots of stuff yet. I was trying to do that with line. This is even sort of a bigger non-committal sort of approach that's actually easier, that does not feel like it at first because I am not used to it. Okay. Who can say, and just do this, you know, just say it. I see like 4 or 5 of you right now, but not everybody. Who thinks it's harder to do big stuff first? Who understands when I was talking about not going to the details first, or not finishing all of something and then going to something else on the page, and I'm saying like get everything going on the whole page? Who finds that to be like you have to remind yourself to do it? You know, like to draw one thing start to finish seems to make more sort of sense, as per my experience, than to mass in the entire 18 by 24 drawing before I put anything, you know, all that. So we have to practice that, right? Let me get a piece of sketchbook here. I'll come back to those composition studies. It's note-taking time, okay? It's not only great listening time. By the way, I get the impression that some of, about certain, based upon the views that I saw, some people, you know, replayed, you know, and re-listened and reminded, you know, the video when it went up. You know, that's a good thing to do, because so much of this is just about repetition. I talked about the redundancy that can happen. Yeah, hearing certain things over and over and reminding myself, you know, so my habits will change. That will continue. So you'll hear some things again. Okay, some new things will be introduced, but you'll, you know, I'll keep going back to certain themes and I will repeat them. Okay, so line, which is wonderful. None of this is me beginning to say, forget about what we learned for the last couple of weeks. That is absolutely not the case. Line is wonderful, okay? But as we established on the first day, moving forward and kept, line is a stand-in for an edge. Line is this fantastic thing that I put on a page that says I can distinguish an edge. And so we actually did some exercises, and sort of culminating a little bit with the drawing that you've either just sent me last night, this morning, or you're going to send me this week, that is about, you know, structural lines and contour and all that stuff, because we have been studying edges, right? And we have been learning tricks about how to improve our line work, okay? And we've gone through all these kinds of things. For example, you know, I was trying to draw something like this, and I've learned that if I am loose and I work structurally, draw through as if I could see through some things, that I could work some of this stuff out so that this might not happen to me as more easily, right? Now, this second one, I can have knowledge that tells me, wait a minute, Mullins, I've got this back here wider than that there. this length is way more than that, or maybe it was just a little. So I often exaggerate to make my points. And oftentimes it's when it's subtle little things, that's when it's hardest to get. But I made that wider back there than I did here. And I know with knowledge that the part that's behind has to go back in space. So this is wrong. That would be using my head, right? I'm hoping that if you have like a little bit of that, like you're trying to work out like a box or a tabletop or something like that, and it looks a little awkward. Let's say I draw it like that. It's like, well, that's not horrible, but it's something bugs me. I'm hoping that you can look at the space in here and here and here and study that shape, or maybe, you know, maybe there's something else that's sitting over here. Oh, it's like, oh, wait, I need to lower that. And I need to pinch this a little bit more because these lines would converge. And, oh, I'm doing that thing where I'm showing more of the back end of it because I know it's there. That's what that stuff Mullins talks about. Like when we know something is there, we want to show it. But if we see it, we'll go with what we see. So tabletops are like that. I may be looking at a tabletop and it may be, oh, wait a minute. If I pinch the back of it and make the back not just a little less wide than that, maybe it's a little more easier on my eyes and I'm okay with it. I will not go into an entire lecture on perspective yet, for the very reason that too much theory will have you trying to make the world fit into that theory rather than looking. Because if what I'm about to tell you now, if it works well, you don't need to know any of that. You only need to be able to see. What am I talking about? Okay, so line, getting back, line stands for an edge. So we have been tracing along edges and having a great time and developing our sensitivity to that and doing that better. Okay, but edge of what? In every instance in which I'm doing that and I'm following an edge, I could ask myself, well, the edge of what? So let's put some embellishments on this. Line, you have been wonderful. You've been with me all my life. I'll be back. It's been awesome. But I've met shape, and shape is opening up all kinds of new worlds for me, and I've got to be with shape right now. Okay? And I'm making a joke, but this is actually kind of what it's like. Because when you do lines, and we do that, a few of you actually began to put some shading. Thomas Lynn sent me a very nice drawing, and I noticed Thomas was beginning to shade and talk about value a little bit and so forth. But it can be very easy if we are doing line work and we don't shade accurately, bravely, authoritatively, comfortably. We could actually feel like, well, I liked my drawing a lot when it was just lines, but then I feel like I messed it up when I tried to shade it, you know, because maybe you're not working, you know, on the same level, or maybe, you know, I feel like I'm messing my drawing up now. Because if I do lines and my lines are accurate, I sort of fill in everything else. And it's kind of amazing how powerful that is. Here's some more flashing neon lights around shape, right? Shape, big deal. Here comes shape. Again, not putting down line, but line stands for something and line suggests everything. But to get to a thorough, complete looking, value and shape. Okay, because my line says I can perceive an edge, and it's easiest to perceive an edge when there's a lot of contrast, when there's a lot of difference in value. For example, you know, it may not be easy to distinguish some of the things that are going on in my shirt because you may be seeing two values that aren't that different. Whereas if I take something that is very different in value and I hold it in front of my shirt, you see that? See how it just pops out, as people like to say? That's kind of what I have going on with my picture over here, because the picture is surrounded with values that are on the other end of the scale. Okay. Line is when I can see a difference. This is very good. You know, it keeps me from bumping into things. I learned it probably when I was an infant. As I said on the first day, there are not lines really there. There's not lines around me. There is not a line around stuff. There's not a line around any of it. The line is the thing on my page that says, there's the edge. Very useful. But I now ask, you know, what an edge between what? What is that edge? Is that an edge between my head and the ceiling? You know, that you're seeing? Is that the edge between, you know, and of course, here's where it gets really interesting, because if I'm looking at you and your rectangle and I see your head, and then I see like, oh, I see a door back there, and I'm like, well, edge of what? Maybe I'm pretty good. Maybe I could make a guess that I bet there's about this many feet between you and the door back there. And maybe I'll be pretty accurate. But for the most part, the kind of looking that I'm going to ask you to do, we don't really do. Line, symbols. Remember me talking about that on the first night? Here is a great symbol. Symbols are fantastic. You know, I like these. Didn't like those as much, I guess. Became an artist instead of, you know, my brother got a math PhD. I always thought, what the heck is that? You know, like I was always like, that's hard, you know. Math is hard. You know, other things are easier. We're all like that. We all have things that we feel better at, prefer, find, you know, all that as kids. But remember on that first night, I was telling you that you always get to look at the answer sheet, and I was always saying, I'll never make you memorize a bunch of symbols. I will never say, like, you know, it's not gonna ever get that complex. You're never gonna have to like know all this stuff. I'm just gonna say, look at it, which sounds, you know, glib or something, you know, like, well, look at it, you know, but I have to teach you looking, right? And how we've worked our thinking so much more than our looking, right? So when you see this, and it is red, I really hope you apply the brakes, okay? I really hope when you are driving and you see that shape and it's red, you don't, please do not go, okay, what exactly is that shape? And is it a cadmium red, or is it a little more like Scarlet Lake? And then crash into something because you're looking when you should just be stopping your car. By all means, look at that and know that that means stop and be done with it. Do not do a thorough visual analysis of what kind of red that is, or what the negative space around that shape is. Just stop, right? So we do all kinds of these things in a given day. We do so many of these. It's really amazing. We just do it, you know, it just becomes a reflex, a habit, we just do it. But the main thing that's going on is we've got to replace, when we're going to draw, we have to replace that kind of stuff with some deep looking. And we've already engaged in some of that compared to the past, just in our contour work, just in the line work, just in sort of, you know, like the beginning of putting 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. We've already engaged with that quite a bit, but I'm about to kick that into turbo compared to what can be done with just line. Because line stands for the edges, but what if you cut out all the symbols and you just go to exactly what's there, which would involve matching the color and matching shapes. But we only have to do value, so because we're working in black and white. All right, so a little bit about our history drawing. Of course, I can't wait, you know, to see, like, it's kind of awesome. Remember when that was good enough for you? That's our house, right? This is the sun, right? When we're really little, you know how all kids draw, right? And these kind of things that stand for things, like, you know, and I love kids' drawings because they'll be doing these kind of, they don't critique themselves the way we will at a certain age, but they'll be doing that and say, well, that's so-and-so. Well, how do I know that's so-and-so? Well, because I put his hat on there, and the hat, everybody knows, you know what I mean? It's just be like, and we're good, you know? Everybody knows I'm drawing Wolverine, see? You know, like we'll just do that, you know, and we know, and then something happens, I don't know, maybe you're 11, maybe you're 12, something like that. You start wanting what you're doing to match some other stuff you've seen, right? Oftentimes it's less about wanting what you're doing to look just like the world when you look out the window. It's more like when you see other art, you know, like, I want my drawing to look like what I see in these comic books. That's cool. You know what I mean? Or I want my, you know, there's something like that goes on. So not necessarily like, but you know what I'm saying? Or just as much, you don't want it to look as childlike. You become aware that, like, well, you know, something like that. And this is where a lot of people just stop drawing regularly because, you know, because of how they feel about it. If they feel like it's going well, they'll keep drawing. If they feel like they're getting something good, like I'm copying this comic book cover and I like what I'm getting, well, then I'll do it some more and I'll keep doing it like that. But nobody in school is making you continue to do it necessarily, right? Unlike that, I am not being held to getting that down before I move forward, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff like I'm expected to, you know, sort of have it all, you know, and then, like, that's part of the curriculum. Everybody's here. And, you know, hey, little Mullins over there, if you're not getting that as fast as your neighbor, you still need to do it. You know what I mean? So stick with it, right? Nobody does that with drawing. Nobody sort of like makes you keep, you know, it's just not there. So who relates to what I'm saying? Everybody remember, like, making lots of drawings as a kid, and then can you remember a time? Yeah, you're right. There was a time in school where there's like 1 or 2 kids in the class that are like, they keep drawing for fun or for their own edification, or kind of like, you know what I mean? But it's not like a curricular requirement that we draw a still life to a certain level that has been deemed appropriate so we can move on to drawing stuff at another level, or you know what I mean? And so if you think about this for a minute, it's like, well, why would I really like bug myself over this kind of stuff? Because how long did I take, and over what part of my life did I take to learn, you know, these other subjects? You know, we did a little bit, and we did, you know what I mean, over the K through 12 period. It's like, man, I took my time, and I, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't, you know, in 2 weeks, you know, be bothered if you're not, you know, doing masterworks sort of automatically. If, you know, if you've had, how much have you been doing of one thing versus the other? And if you really start thinking about that, and you start thinking about your sort of development over school, and all that, it's like, yeah, that's like, and you know what? Yeah, that is a little more complex to learn all those sort of things that stand for other things and put them together. You know, it's like, that's a lot of stuff going on there. And so all of a sudden it's flipped around. It's like, wow, I'm seeing pretty good for 2 weeks in, you know, for not having like worked on this for all of that time. So what happens in that period is we want to make things look real, right? To whatever degree we sort of get into making things look real. And I got no instruction in that. Some people do, depending on what program they're in, but for the most part, I sort of like played around with it myself on the side. And I would do these little things, and somebody would be like, well, that's cool. Will you draw me this, or will you draw me that? And so this was kind of going on in an extracurricular way. But then I found out when I got in college that you can be instructed in this. Observational drawing actually is, it's got and the things that I have been showing you exist as pedagogical standards, which is why things like structural lines, if you Google them, you'll get all this kind of how to draw stuff. You also might get some things from some other fields, like organizational lines would give you some results from lots of other fields too. But you'll definitely see like examples of blind contour and continuous line and all of that, like it exists as learning to draw stuff. You'll find it harder from this point forward for that to happen. It's out there, but it won't be as simple as like, well, blind contour, bam, and then you see one of these drawings that looks exactly like what we did, But what could have happened is we could have introduced what I'm introducing right now. Because in that period that I became sort of interested in making my Spider-Man look better, or my X-Men look better, or like my whatever, you know what I mean? And I practiced. And then in high school, of course, it's like famous musicians that I admired. I would draw them, because that's what you do, is you pick subjects that you find fun and interesting and you try to draw them. But eventually, with instruction, I found that anything is good. So that's that whole thing about seeing form, right? You've heard me talk about that. Like, I know that I will never convince anybody that a skull is the same as, a tea pitcher or a cup, but forms are forms, right? And we have to see forms. And how do we see forms? So we've done a little work with the thing that we've always used. I'm comfortable with a pen in my hand because I've used a pen in my hand for everything. I've done my writing, and I've done my math, and I've done my whatever with a pen. I may not have done as much with this. That's the best way to show you. These, because now, when we were little kids, we actually had crayons, right? And that's kind of interesting because they're waxy. They're not dusty. They're not as messy as charcoal. But crayons, which again later we start, when you're in high school, you're, maybe somebody's being mean. If they saw you using crayons, they might, which is silly because crayons are actually kind of a nice waxy sort of, but what I find is we were not taught complex things about color. We were taught to pick one and fill it in. So, for example, well, I'm doing the sky, so give me a blue. Now I'm doing the grass, so give me a green. And we just tend to, what is the name of something that, we need to know? And that's it. Whereas then when it becomes time to learn to paint, it's like, well, what kind of green? And sort of, we don't just take it like a crayon and sort of, we mix it and we work with it, and we develop the ability to see lots of different hues and lots of different intensities. And so we'll do that with value. But I don't know if I worked with value at all until I was instructed in it. Because certainly the art supplies were not like, the house might have like all kinds of pens and some pencils laying around, and there's certain things like that. But ask yourself this: how much drawing from other media have you done versus drawing from life? When you went outside and you took the sketchbook and you were drawing like that, how much have you done that? Versus maybe copying some things that were small and on really close to you, or actually like copying another two-dimensional image. I mean, for me, it's like I had copied a lot of two-dimensional images, a lot of other people's art, a lot of other graphics, and things like that. But then it's like to see something like 6 feet away from me in a room set up by a prof or whatever, it's like it was a very different thing spatially. And then to get like this messy stuff, and of course you hate it at first. Like, you know, I had somebody's like, this is getting all over my, this is a mess, you know, like, why are you doing this to me? I like my nice little like felt tip pen, you know. Well, there's a reason. Pardon me there. Okay, so here's a good way to segue. You recall me doing this before. You know, maybe the first night, a mushroom. So, and at the time I was saying if you vary your line weights, that'll be a little better. If I take this, you know, and I'll break it so it's a little smaller. I can just go like that and suggest all kinds of stuff. Matter of fact, I can go like this and maybe think a little bit about the negative space activity. Do you see what that's doing? Now, I've just drugged this thing. I haven't done any, you know, thing fancy or whatever. But oh, yeah, there's light and shadow in there. As a matter of fact, while line implies everything, basically, same thing going on. You know what I mean? Like I haven't talked about that stuff at all. So if I, 2 ways to draw. I hope everybody's really with me right here, because this is, we'll keep coming back to it and it really matters. Like if I do this, just like I was saying on day one, I haven't had to sort of like, that as an approach I've never had to teach anybody. It sort of exists that like if I get my lines right, the box will be right. But it's leaving out a lot of the information, okay? So there's drawing like that, and I'll do one with pencil too, so it doesn't seem as much of a leap. But there's drawing like that, and then there's drawing like this. And I'll try to not even like do the lines first. So are you still with me, Huron, about this? This is one of the longest answers you've ever gotten, but it's the answer. What if I make the shape? I've been doing the edges of the shape, but what if I jump to the shape? So here we got 1, 2, 3, right? What if I do 1, 2, 3. Matter of fact, I'll even do 4. It casts a shadow. And I'll do 5. Because I put that dark backdrop that Mullins was babbling on about earlier in there. Okay, get the idea?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. 1, 2, 3 shapes, a 4th and a 5th shape. And I even get a little annoyed because I'm using a pencil, and the pencil was all sharpened up. So the pencil is more given to line when it's sharpened up than it is to tone. But if I get it a little duller, I can get straight to this value thing, which is more powerful. Once again, never a knock on my friend line, because line rules. But there's what line is and what line does, and then there's what's before my eyes, right? Let's try it again. There's drawing like this, which again, I've never had to explain to anybody. And then there's this, and in neither of these examples am I trying harder. As a matter of fact, in my tone one, I might even be like sloppier. But there's just like what value does, right? So if I'm drawing if I'm drawing myself, I'm looking at my little thumbnail there, you know, and somebody's talking, like, boy, is this lecture boring? And I'm sort of like drawing. Oh wait, everybody knows Mullins has a beard, you know, so put that on there, you know. Which again, I might connect that to when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, if I did that, I'd be fine with it. But if I'm doing this, and then I decide like, well, that's kind of cartoony. Here's the thing. To make that not look cartoony, I've got to get it really, really, really accurate. Okay. That is not the case when I work with value. So on a simple form, you know, some picture, or I almost got a pour over coffee thing and brought it up here. I know you guys have things in your house that are good for, you may think you don't have anything interesting, but you do. You know, if I'm doing something like that, basically what I'm saying is I'm going to put it all on getting these contours perfect. And that's what we kind of worked on. And I was trying to let you know that, like, well, you don't have to hit it once and get it perfect. You can like use these structural lines and you can go around and all that, and then you can find it, you know, and so forth. And you can keep that for the rest of your life, you know, working that way. But there's also looking at something and studying it from this kind of perspective, which don't take that literally because I'm not talking about from this kind of vantage or this kind of approach. Because in art, you know, perspective means recession into space, and it's a particular thing. But there's also this kind of thing, which is that my sort of foreshadowing of the, you know, my hint about all this was a negative space kind of thing, because negative space gets into shape, right? And there's just what kind of information you're bringing in, right? So this is why when I'm doing simple objects, if you ever had that experience where it's like, well, I can draw like stuff from the kitchen, and that's going to be all right. But if I get it like a portrait, you know what I mean? I can't meet my satisfaction. I can't please myself doing portraits, but I can do it with like objects, you know? And we tend to do that. Why is that? Because they're just forms. Well, two things are going on. The human face is complex, but it's also the most like symbolic. Our brain will drive us crazy, and we will demand that we get it perfect. I cannot tell you how in beginning painting classes, when we do still life, students will be very satisfied. They'll be very happy with their, you know, they'll paint a still life of bottles and this junk that I take from the prop room and I set up, and they'll do it and they'll be good with it. And then I will see them, you know, in a subsequent lesson or in a subsequent class, when it's the human figure, I'll see them, what they're asking of themselves will just go like way up, way, way, way. I will see them operating. They'll actually, to my eye, my trained eye, I will see them creating a painting that is way more accurate than they ever did of the still life. But they're still frustrated. It doesn't look like them. It looks this way. It looks ridiculous. It looks like, you know, I hate it. You know, they'll start saying all these kind of things about how it doesn't look right. And I'm looking at a figure drawing or a figure painting that is way more accurate than the still life they did. But their still life doesn't bug them, you know, because it's not a person, and it's not, you know, they're going all the way to wanting a likeness and no awkwardness from a human form, you know, which is like, it's us, you know, all of a sudden all this stuff is coming into it. So it's pretty comfortable to draw things that we don't care about that much, you know, but then it's also sort of like, well, how correct do I have to get before I decide it's acceptable, right? And so we experience these kind of things when we draw. So once again, there's a point where why is it that I'm okay with my cartooning? you know, but not when I try to do this other stuff. Now, usually when I tell a group of students, well, you're all excellent cartoonists, they'll be like, no, I'm not, you know, because they want to be better than they are. But you know, to engage in cartooning is largely to go back to sort of doing symbols. Okay, I'm doing a cartoon of Mullins, you know, and everybody knows he's got like this big nose. So all I got to do is do something that says big nose, and I'm good. You know, I don't have to actually do what's there to be seen. So to do that is still more to think it and to be familiar with stuff that stands for stuff. Whereas that potato I had last class is to examine mass and form. And so what we're trying to do now is go from what can be done with line to what can be said about a three-dimensional something in the world, in space, that is receiving light and casting shadow and so forth. So just like that fictional mushroom that I just did, we didn't take this messy thing and use it for doing that. Why would you do that? Unless we were working on a chalkboard, why would you do that? You know, of course, I prefer a dry erase marker on a dry erase surface to a chalkboard any day, because it doesn't make that sound that I find can be, I don't even have to do my nails. I can just the sound of the chalk on the, you know, I like a dry erase board any day. But, you know, if you're out to do that, why would you do a messy kind of, you know, stick of something when you can have, like, you know, a pen? But this is actually better for what I'm going to ask you to do, because it's not given to doing all those other things. So it's going to help me sort of like, you know, break away from my history of making marks that were always symbolic. And I can turn this on its side. You know, so, oh, well, potato, remember I was doing that last time, right? But then there's drawing the potato like this. Here's my, like, 10-second potato, you know. And which one of those begins to really suggest a, quote, real potato? Once again, what is a potato? It's a lump of organic sort of mass. It doesn't have like a lot of, you know, but it's a volumetric sort of thing in space, right? So I'll get away from expecting that line to do everything, and I'll understand that that line is this. It's an edge between two values, and I can read that, right? So maybe one more. I'm looking at, I don't mean to always pick on you, Henry, but I love what I'm seeing for this. I'm looking at Henry, and you know, I can do these lines to say, like, this is the perspective. Oh, and there's a ceiling. Well, how the heck do I draw that ceiling fan? I don't know. Anyway, Henry's looking there, and I can see, like, the angle of the ceiling back there, you know, and there's a door. I get those lines right, that's going to be okay. And Henry's back there, and, you know, so I can do this, right? And I can do, oh, Henry wears glasses, right? So, you know, by the way, that's a pretty strong symbol. Everybody knows glasses are, you know, that's not really what glasses look like. It's just, if I do that and I'm trying to get you to guess, somebody's going to say glasses, and you know what I mean? Like, you ever play that game Pictionary where you try to, like, get people to guess what your clue is, right? You know, but that's not really what they look like. But we have all kinds of ideas like that. So I can do that, or I can begin to start putting in information like this. Like, instead of, like, glasses, we all know, you know, he wears glasses. We can be like, wait a minute, the light source is to the right, and one side, just like potato, one side shadow, one side light. Oh, wait, oh, I get to work negatively. Cool. Because you guys see what I'm up to here? So You see what that does? And I haven't refined a shape at all. Matter of fact, I've kept it loose. So that, Huron, this is the answer to your question, is this does not have to be necessarily have to be perfected first before you start to talk about this. Maybe you could go to this and maybe you just get to keep it blurry until you want to tighten it up.
Okay, I see. So
Everybody got this?
line drawing, but it works for shape drawing.
Well, we're going to work on shape now. So everybody join me now. Take one of these charcoal, you know, and some paper. I've got some half sheets of paper, of my drawing paper, which may be a little better for this. Okay. Everybody got this? Everybody following along with, do I have your rapt attention? Do I have your, are you on the edge of your seat? Okay, so this. Mullins, how do I draw that? You know? Okay, I'll tell you how to draw it. What shape do I see? What value is it? Or often put, what shape do I see? How light or how dark? What shape do I see? How light or how dark? What shape? Now, of course, I turn this, differences, changes in shape. We call things certain, you know, like that's orange. That's, you know, we've got, believe me, the stuff you use when you're ordering something, you know, that's heather gray, this sweater that you're ordering online, you know. But just developing our ability to be as interested in that as lines. So what I want you to do today is don't do outlines. Well, I don't, Mullins. I'm in art class now in college. It's contour, Mullins. Well, right, but don't worry about it. Maybe a little, but okay. Well, how do I draw that? Well, if I do this thing, because what I want to do, even though now I've got this in my hand, I want to approach this the same way I would with a pencil or a pen, and I want to do this. And so will you, you know. I want to contour it. We won't say outline, we'll say, I want to, and I want it to be perfect. Okay, so think about this just like that little cube that I did. I want to do this and get it perfect. But now I understand that these are symbols for edges. Lines stand for edges. So what if this is my shape maker? A pencil can be too, but what if the way to draw this is kind of doing the same thing, but not really doing the exact same thing? Meaning I shift my priority to well, all right, I'll try it with shape and value, Mullins. Now, I might do something like this, and right away, it might not be perfect, and I might be, oh, did I do this right? And this would definitely be one of those instances where I should tell the other side of my brain to butt out, okay? Because I'm not done yet, and this is all good because it doesn't have to be perfect immediately anyway. I can look again. I can compare again. I can add, you know, so all right. Okay, Mullins. All right, I'll play your game. Okay, yeah. Now, I'm not doing this just because my brain is saying it has to look like that on paper. I'm looking at the subject, and I am trying to make it more about value, because my line drawing doesn't include value. And so instead of like doing a line drawing and then carefully adding tone, I'm just going to jump to the tone. So I could try to make this shape perfect right away, or I could try to get like, well, wait a minute, is that what I should be doing yet? So everybody, you know what one of the best things to do is to blur your eyes or squint. Or if you're mildly nearsighted, when you take off your glasses, now of course I was never mildly before I got laser. If I took off my glasses, I wouldn't see jack, okay? But sometimes if you just have a correction of like one or two or something, you take off your glasses and it's just, those crisp edges are a little less crisp, but you still see this kind of information, and that works with, you know, colors like that. What if I'm not worried about being perfectly in focus immediately, and the edges being perfect immediately, and I begin to study it value-wise? Now, well, your drawing doesn't look all that hot to me, Mullins. I think you need to go in there and make perfect edges, right? You know, that is the kind of thinking that can get me in trouble. It doesn't mean when I work this way, I'm not trying to do well from the onset. But the thing is, I'm also being realistic that maybe I can't nail it with one shot, and maybe it needs to be moved. Let's get our next friend into the equation, which is the kneaded eraser. Everybody break out the kneaded eraser. Now it comes as a little square in a wrapper, but it's not kneaded because I must have it, which that's true too, but it starts, you know, K, like dough, kneaded like dough. I can do all that and I can keep doing that. So that gives me some options. One is, which is it gets really, really dirty, I can actually like fold it around and twist it around and get it to a part that's clean again, and fold the, you know, really messy with charcoal part inside, I can get it clean. But this is a drawing tool rather than a corrector, right? We tend to think eraser, that's when you take it away because you screwed it up and you got to start over. Think of this as a value adjuster and a shape adjuster. So we got two tools. They are both shape makers and value adjusters. Don't think of them as line makers, okay?
Yes.
This is not for this can make a small shape or a skinny shape, but I don't want to do lines with it. This can make something lighter, or it can change a shape, or it can do, you know, something like that. But don't think of this as just like, you know, this is for when I need to eradicate what I did and start over. Don't think about it that way. So if my shape of my picture is not perfect, I can work in I can add or I can subtract. Okay, so this is my subtractor, and my charcoal stick is for adding. So I can go like this, and I can go like that. And then if I decide like, wait a minute, I got that too, you know, I'm comparing and I see a difference, I'll just add some value. I can always put it back. It's like that shape is too, it's skinnier than that. I gotta, you know, I can always change it. So last time I may have said, I want you to think of this as a malleable, changeable thing, but I know that we're working with lines, so it's really hard to think of that way. I wish you were thinking about this like clay, where you just keep moving it and moving it and moving it, and you're not, you know. And then I said, like, remember, if we were using a hammer and chisel and you took off too much, you might be in trouble, but think of this like clay. You can add, subtract, put back, change, move around. As a matter of fact, my shapes do not have to be perfect. What I want to do is I want to put value in there where it goes, more or less, and then I'll refine it. So this is that general before the specific stuff, big before small, okay? This picture is pretty cool because it actually doesn't even have, I don't even know if it's got anything that's that small on it. It's got some subtle ridges. But what I can do is I can just keep, you got to work it. Okay, with charcoal drawing, it's about working it. You know, like you don't, See how I'm smudging it with my finger, right? And so that gets messy, but it also keeps me from getting really picky. But I can move this around, and I can change this, and I can soften stuff, and I can do all these kinds of things. And if I want, you know what, this back here, that looks pretty good. But since I just did one swipe, and I can see the paper coming through a little bit, I want to get rid of that. I want to work that. So you see what happens when I do that, and you can't see how this gets more meaningful? Because this is like a solid dark value, and this thing is generally light. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I don't get parts of this and that the same. That's my big area of interest for this, is value matching. So I'm going to take a handy paper towel, because I could wear my index finger out. And I'm just going to give this a good rub and get my values even. And then I'll return to try to make more values with my two tools to do that with. I may add some more back here, because I'm asking these two questions. What shape and what value? And you're not going to want to believe this at first, because it's going to seem too simple. Your brain will tell you, BS, it's not that simple. I must need to read more books. There are two things that you can get right and two things that you can get wrong. Your shape can match or not, and the value, the shade of gray, can match or not. And if something ain't right, it's one of those two things. If you make it something else, if I cook, you know what I'm going to do? This thing has ridges. This thing's got ridges on it. I know that this thing has ridges on it, and I'm going to put some damn ridges on it, because everybody knows that these things have ridges. I'll be really wrong. See that? That's not based on the shape that I see, and that's not the value I see. Right? I got that from somewhere else, and that is not good. Let's get that out of there. Don't want to be doing that. If I think I'll get some cartoony, I'll get a symbol, I will get something that is not based on what I'm looking at. If that's not where I got it, it will look like, you know, and believe me, you'll do it, and you'll know, and maybe it won't be as extreme as the example I just gave, but that's how you make a mistake, is you don't base it on what you're looking at, and you don't match the shape, you don't match the value, you do something else. So lines are really destructive. Now, if I'm careful and really observant, I might do something like that, and it might be okay. But there still isn't a line there. There is a shape of value there. There is an area of value that can be seen as a shape. And so my outlining, see how this looks nice up here? Like kind of believable? This will be destructive, because it's not literally there. It's not literally there. There's something here and there's something there. And to cut to the chase, to not just do what line does, which is suggest that on these two shapes that fit together like two pieces of a puzzle and hook together, I need the value matched, and I don't need a line there. See how that gets better as I take that line away, right? Like, for me to believe that there's something three-dimensional in space there, I've got to work this value up to that edge, because that's what I'm really talking about, is an edge. And so the line stuff's only going to work if I'm making a line drawing, okay? But the lines are my symbols to say there's an edge, but an edge between what? What are the two values? What are these two values that sit together? And that's what I want to get to work on. Is everybody with me?
I have another question.
Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to follow our example with a charcoal drawing of my own, but how do you generate the kind of shape you get not the shape. Let's say the kind of value you get near the near the top of the, what is it, a pot? You're drawing a pot, right?
Yeah, it's a picture.
Well, near the top of the picture, this is what I have.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where you can see it. This is what I have.
Okay. But here's the thing.
Even distribution you're getting.
Here's the thing. Are you looking at the picture?
I'm looking at your drawing of the picture.
Yeah, but you're not looking at the picture.
Yeah.
Which is the answer sheet? You need that picture. Now, I understand, yeah, you're trying to like just make notes and like sort of get like but probably the answer is probably that I did it with my eraser. You know, like what you're seeing that you're not duplicating, it's probably a result of my use of the eraser, I'm guessing. But also, you always got to look at the answer sheet. Okay? So, things that I've done here that have been appreciable have been because they were in the ballpark of the shape and the value that was there in my still life. Things that don't look that great, it's because they're not. It's those two things. And this is gonna be like, because you're not used to applying charcoal to paper, and you're not used to smoothing the values and getting them real even, and you're not used to using a kneaded eraser, pulling it around and getting it to a point, or making a ball, or all that kind of thing. And you need experience working with this tool because this tool is new. All that stuff is there. But in the end, I want you to go forward on your work just asking these two questions, okay? What shape do I see? How light or how dark, okay? That's all I want you to do. And this will be hard to do because you'll want to do additional stuff. You'll want to bring additional stuff to it. I may doubt that it is that simple. I may be, you know, but I may not be able to, as quickly as I want to, look at the subject and extract those two pieces of information and duplicate them. But that's all I'm doing. I've got these things, and this could be a crayon, and this, you know, crayon would be much harder to use an eraser with, I'll tell you. But I've got these things. This is addition and this is subtraction. So I can add if I need the value to be darker. I can subtract if I need it to be lighter. I can leave the paper showing through completely if it's a really light object and I don't, you know, like you saw how I worked around this to get it started. And that's because if I look at it, that's the truth. Everything around my picture in my setup has actually got a darker tone than the thing itself. And the stuff that's on the picture is very subtle. You know, it's all light and values. That's why I put it in my still life. Not because it means, I mean, I might love like iced tea, but that's not why I put it in there. I put it there because it's all in that one end of the value scale. Now, something else you might ask, how do I draw this bottle from the Arsenal cider place or wherever it came from? How do I draw that? And you know the answer. Somebody tell me the answer. How do I draw beer bottles? Somebody tell me. How do I draw beer bottles? Has anybody got the separate? Has anybody got like the edition that has the specifics for beer bottles? No, and you don't need it. It's the exact same way. What shape do I see? How light, how dark? Okay, so check it out. That was a picture. Here is a bottle. I'm not particularly interested in the labels. I don't care what's printed on the surface, okay? Just so you know. So if you have something like this, Actually, some of you may have noticed just in your line drawings that where you tried to duplicate the printed text may have been your least favorite place on the drawing. I don't know, sometimes that can be cute and funny and all kind of, and it can have an appeal, but it's not important. It's not part of the structure. I'm interested in 3 dimensions and volume, stuff like that. So I've got this and I put it before me, and well, what shape and what value? So it can't be that simple, but that's what I want you to use to guide you. You don't have to do outlines. Please do not do outlines. Outlines in this will get you in trouble. Okay, don't turn this up on its end and do this with it. It won't help you. Okay, you might do the tiniest bit of that in the very beginning of the drawing just to indicate where things are, but instead, what does it look like overall? For example, Huron, I'm looking at you right now, and I know that you've got hair on top of your head, but if I just think hair and I start going something like this, that's not going to work out that well. But if I look and I get the overall shape of value, which is a big solid shape, that will work. That's true. Okay, because what I'm looking at now, I can't see. I know there's individual hairs, but I can't see them anyway. What is the shape that I see? Okay, so overall, and you know the darndest thing about this is that I'm telling myself, you know, and I don't want to believe it. It sounds like, well, the teacher is just pulling my leg or something. But the darndest thing about this is it's actually easier. Okay. But earlier on, I was talking about how things never seem like, it never seems like the easier way if it's a completely unfamiliar way and you've never done that before. But I don't have to get any edges perfect. I can refine my shapes later. So in something like this, I may be getting the shapes kind of off, but it's okay because I can continually push and adjust and change the shapes using my kneaded eraser and my stick of charcoal. The biggest problem I'm going to have working on this drawing is that those two things are not familiar to me. I'm not used to them. I want to put a pen in my hand, you know what I mean? That's the kind of, you know, this is messy or whatever, but forget about all that and just remember that I only have to keep looking at those two things. Those two things will read the information for me. If I see a shape and I can see about how big it is and what it's shaped like or whatever, that will help me. And then if I can match the shade of gray that it should be, okay? So I might do something like this with the charcoal on its side, and I might put it in there, and I might, instead of like trying to get perfect edges on it next, I could ask myself, what about the value? Can we make the overall value of something as important as, you know, what we would do with line work? Of course we can. We just have to change our priorities and say, well, you know, I want this to be a little darker because this bottle, I'm going to apply a little more charcoal, and I'm interested in the value. I'm not going to be interested in perfect shapes on the outside edge immediately just yet. This is actually easier. Now think about a sculptural analogy. If I had a lump of clay and I was going to sculpt the bottle, should I make a big lump that generally matches the bottle first? Or should I go to the cap and try to perfectly finish the cap and then go from there? Obviously, I got to get a big lump that overall matches the bottle. So then from there, I might get on the form itself rather than being only about the outside edge. I might begin to see some of the shapes. Mullins, I can't draw a beer bottle. It's made of glass. There has to be separate rules for glass. Glass has to be, it's glass. I mean, I can't use the same rules to do something. When I'm drawing something made of glass, it's got to be different than something made of metal or something that's made of plastic or something that's, no. It will look like glass if you match values and shapes and values. It will look like glass. The reason that the picture doesn't look like this is because it's in a very different value range. It's composed of different shades of gray. This one is on the other end, and then it has little shapes that we call shiny spots or highlights. And those, how do you get shine? Well, you find what are those little shapes, and you get the value right. And if that's what you see, that's what you do. Your brain might say, like, it can't be that, it's got to be, but then some idea, some cartoon or symbol of what is happening will appear on your page that did not come from your answer sheet. Your answer sheet is a still life. So every piece of information I take that is a halfway decently matched shape and a halfway decently matched value will contribute to my drawing. And I can go back and I can add, maybe there's a little shape that is darker still. I can do that. I don't want to add lines though. They need to be shapes. Stay off those edges. Don't outline those edges. That's not there. Now, if you near an edge, there is a shape. What is that? What does the shape look like? But value is actually probably more powerful. Actually, I know that it is, okay, so take it from me. Value is more powerful than the shape. Maybe you'll do the shape at the end because that would be specific. And we're working from the general to the specific. So I'll just keep moving around. I'll keep finding a shape. I'll finding a value and I'll match it with my two tools and I'll put it on there. And as I do this, it will begin to look more like a bottle. And then I may have to get my little retractable eraser pen out to get some of these things that are really different because the kneaded eraser will be better for subtle changes. And this one, if I've got something like maybe a lighter value still sits inside another shape, and I'll need that, just easier to get a little highlight that way. But everything I'm doing, what shape is it? How light or how dark? Those questions. Okay, you might be doing something on the paper, like you might not be rubbing the shape solid enough, right? You might be not working the charcoal enough. That's real common for us to get like our shapes kind of like not clear enough. Like you got to work the charcoal. That's always true. Like you got to keep trying to get what you see. So if you just put down one swipe and expect it to be done, then you may have something that you still need to do. And you got to get that kind of experience with working with the charcoal. But more so than the lines, remember I was saying it could be really good to like get up and look at your work from a distance. That will really be the case with this. You maybe think you're doing like terrible. And then if you get up and look at it from far away, you might be like, that's a lot better, than I thought, like, geez. Because we'll be thinking that we need to make perfect edges first, but shift the importance off of those perfect edges and just tell yourself there's two things I can get right, two things I can get wrong. If I'm in an area, what shape? It's one of those two things. And if you do this right, if you match these values, you may even get a property to something that looks like it's made of glass. Okay, I cannot use these same values on that picture. If I use the exact same values on that picture that I used on this, they will look the same and it will not be true. They're not the same. Okay, so how do you do something that's transparent, something that's see-through? Who can tell me? Somebody give me the answer. I've got another object and you can see through it. How do I draw that? That's hard. Hell with that, I'm just not going to do it. Right? It's too hard. Somebody tell me the answer. How do I draw this?
It's really light values.
Let's match the values. Yeah, I match the shapes and I match the values. Do I need to read a separate book about what to do if it's a see-through object? No, no, I'll do the same thing. It's just those two things. I know it sounds like overly simplistic, okay? But how well you've matched value and how well you've matched shape will be the answer. There's one other thing that's going on which has to do with how media is applied to a surface, but don't worry about that yet. First, I just want everybody to drill into their brains, shape and value. Because if you can see those two things accurately, you'll become like a camera. I mean, obviously, you know, that's theoretically. Like, but if you were matching those two things, like you'll always get your angles right if you see the shape right. So if you're looking at an angle like a wall, maybe there's a ceiling shape to match. If you're looking at something that you would call a line, maybe there's a shape that it's the edge of, right? And so suspend line and put it out of the equation right now, and let's go with shape. So something like that, like, you know, seems really like crazy hard and all that. Yeah, okay, well, I think what he said is pretty, you know, I don't want any really dark values on that. And I should approximate the shape. So I'll do that. And maybe, you know, maybe, well, what's it sitting in front of or what's behind it? You know, like maybe part of it has another one of those deals where the dark ground helps me, because, you know, maybe there's a bottle, and this is the truth actually in my setup, there's a bottle that's like partially behind it where I put it, you know. So, you know, just sort of like not worrying about it being perfect right away, just working around, taking in some information about the overall silhouette of it. And then I'll take my paper towel, because I don't want the paper showing through half the time. I don't want this to look like one of those rubbings, you know. I want it to be even. I want please remember that. Please remember to, you know, and this is easier than using my finger all the time for large areas. Yeah, what is the overall value? And if I squint, or if I, like, you know, make it blurry somehow. You know, so squinting is like a really good tool to not see the specifics, but to see the overall, you know. So yeah, I'll get started like this, and then, like, yeah, I'll adjust the value. I'll find some shapes. And believe me, it can be anything. If you try to contrive, if you have some sort of idea that, like, I know what is there, and you put in something that, like, it'll probably be symbolic. This is the symbol for wrinkled cloth. Just making marks like that. But the truth is, if you wrinkle cloth, you'll see like every shape under the sun. It can be anything, okay? So what's really going on there? Well, let's just give it my undivided attention, and let's just stare at the answer sheet, stare at the still life way more than I stare at my paper. Let's try to take a piece of information from the subject, and let's try to duplicate it on my paper and make sure that I'm not, you know, so look at the subject, look at the paper, look at the subject, look at the paper, you know. What shape? How light or how dark? What shape? How light or how dark? And just keep asking those questions. And inevitably, I will find some places where there are smaller shapes that need to be darker still. And there's places I need to lighten. And I just keep revisiting it and readjusting it. And eventually, by getting enough of these shape and value pieces of information matched, I'll get into a place where I will feel it is acceptable. But if you want to go all the way to a high degree of refinement, just keep doing the same two things. Find a shape and match a value, and duplicate that on your paper. You know, and if something on your paper does not look right, it's a discrepancy in one of those two things. And if you can find that discrepancy and change it to make it more accurate, the drawing will improve. And I will keep going like that But it's really important that you make your values. I mean, do take that paper towel, do some rubbing. Make sure you subtract as much as you add, because this is a really great drawing tool, this eraser, for working subtractively. I actually prefer you do most of your work with it. Like once you lay down an overall value that seems kind of like right for that area, then try, I mean, if you find, you know, I need to add to make something darker, by all means, but try to do as much subtraction or more as you do addition, okay? Now I see people are working. I'm glad to see that. Here's what I want you to do, okay? Everybody put your eyes back on this paper, because this is important. When I go to do my still life and I do some thumbnails, which I did before our class started, and I'm figuring out my composition, which I want you to do again, like how are you going to crop your still life setup, right? And considering the negative spaces and all that. And I lay that out. This is very important. I lay that all out on my big 18 by 24 paper. Let's say this is my 18 by 24 paper, okay? This is how I want you to draw, so pay careful attention. This is like the rules for this assignment, right? And this assignment's not going to be done in one session. But when you transfer to your big 18 by 24 paper, I want you to do just the minimum of this. Maybe I'm doing too much already, I don't know, but just enough of this, because I know what's going to happen. If I tell you guys you can't do any lines, okay, you'll be like, I don't know where anything is. You know. So when you're transferring your composition, and do them lightly, and knowing that they will disappear. When you add your values, do not let if you've got lines from the start of the drawing for placement, you've got to rub that tone all the way up to the edge, because if they remain, it will flatten and it's harmful. Okay, so this here, I'm going to work the tone all the way up the edge, and this has got to go away, right? It's got to be replaced by a solid shape of value. So do just enough of this. I mean, tell yourself the bare minimum, no more than you got to have. And a matter of fact, you might make these negative spaces a bigger deal than the object themselves. But once you've got them there, again, I'm doing a little thing. This is your 18 by 24 paper, right? What do you do next? You just spend your time, whatever you do, don't try to start one of these objects and completely model it in all the values from start to finish and leave everything else on your page alone, okay? You're going to want to do that, but just like I was saying when we were doing the line drawing, you know, to get the whole drawing going together at once, don't finish a thing at a time, you know. A negative space or a cast shadow is just as important. Like if you got good lighting in your setup, there'll be a shadow thrown some way, and that is just as good a shape, if not, I mean, it counts. Okay, so what I want you to do is then spend the whole first session, and it may not be that long of a session, or it might take you, because you're actually giving it the attention that it needs for once, instead of trying to do a line drawing and then fill it in as an afterthought. Since you're actually jumping to value first, it may take you plenty of time. But pour the foundation. Don't jump to the shutters or the shingles on the roof, as it were. Everything is about major shapes and values. So what I'm going to do to get started is mass in with the side of my stick. I want to mass in and cover everywhere. And of course, if the one place I might leave showing the paper, just showing through, would be the silhouette of that picture. if that picture was in my still life, it's so light, you know. But what is the overall one big solid shape? And then maybe you might add two, but big shapes first, right? General before the specific. So get everything on the page, cover that page up so you can compare the relationships. If you really want to work, you know, this is kind of the equivalent of me saying, let's do some bench pressing or some deadlifting, rather than taking like one of those little hand squeezers and going like this. Let's do what really counts a lot. Let's do some, I don't know if you guys know, you know, if that means anything to you, but let's get what really counts, you know, and let's get the big stuff, and let's not sort of, you know, dance around on things that are kind of minor, because that's what we'll do. We'll want to go into the details. And what I want to do is I want to have a paper, an 18 by 24 page. And of course, you can make some of these shapes quite crisp once you do this, and you'd be amazed. You'll actually have a lot for your time. Whereas if you try to do one object and go straight to its details and finish it completely, and then go to another, and then go to another, and I'll fill the background in last and all that, that will take you much longer, and you're a lot more apt to mess something up. So trust me on that. It only seems harder because it's not the usual, or it's not what you expect. But lay in these major sort of pieces of information about the major shapes and what their values are. Compare them with each other, you know, and rub those around, and just do the big stuff, like you're pouring concrete on a structure. And the way you do that is you get like the big value, like a big value analysis. Your brain might say you need to hurry up and put something small and refined into your drawing so that you know that it's coming out well. But if this is just big shapes and the values match, that's a good start, because you're going to come back to it. So anything that is like medium sized, of course, some of this stuff is kind of hard to me to do because I'm making a little miniature example here, but anything that's like medium sized or smaller, if it's smaller, don't do it. That's for later, you know. And back away from your work once in a while, you know, and check it. And instead of saying, I'm going to go in there and make a perfect edge, or I'm going to make a perfect line, or I'm going to put something smaller in there, make the value of something accurate. Because what's going to happen is that everything in your setup is different value-wise, okay? So try to make value matching a top priority. And try to practice seeing, you know, you can work negatively, work around things a lot if the background is darker than a thing, and create real space, like light and shadow. Here's what you don't do. Everybody watch this. Do not do this, because it will stay a mark on the surface. See how I was creating a blurry but believable space? See how that looks like a vulgar kind of, like, don't do that. Outlining will let you down, okay? Just do shapes and values. Keep the stick on the side and try to just keep studying this and looking at it, and what is the relationship of these things and what are the values. Adjust them as needed, but don't get too picky just yet. General before the specific. What shape and what is the value? So you don't have to finish this. We want to rush to the finish. We want to rush to like the little particular things, okay? But you don't have to do that right now. You can put those smaller things on top of or inside of what you establish first, okay? So your first session, your only goal is that your 18 by 24 paper is covered with big shapes that match and the values more or less match. If it looks a little fuzzy, no problem, okay? If it looks a little wonky, no problem. As a matter of fact, I always tell folks to try to think about this as, what if I took it out of focus, right? That's why I like removing your correction. If you're only mildly nearsighted, it can actually be very useful because that's kind of what we're trying to do at the beginning, is draw it out of focus. So if it's out of focus, the values will still be there to be seen, okay? If you tighten everything up though, then you're saying like, I better get it all perfect or I'm gonna have a problem. You don't have to like have these little things in it yet perfect. Whereas if you, with a line drawing, you know, it's kind of like that, you know, like that's why I was saying like be comfortable with all these stray lines and these network of lines or whatever, you know, and like in the beginning, don't put that much pressure upon yourself. Here, it's even simpler because you're doing big masses. And so once you get all this together, then you can see what you're doing because you can compare a thing to another thing to another thing. And so if this area needs to be a little darkened, I'll add a little charcoal. If this area needs to get lightened up, I'll lighten it up with my eraser. And once that's there, then I'm sitting in a really good place to add medium and small shapes on top of or inside of, whichever way you want to say. And that's where we'll get detail. You know, we'll get the detail later. But for now, try to just get it all massed in. Once you have, then if you put like a little like shift in value with a little bit more crispness to it, it'll be very meaningful. Then if you put like a little bit more information in, you've created the context, you've got a place to put it, you've got the foundation. See how my eraser is a drawing tool? It's not just a thing to wipe stuff out with, but it's actually good for drawing. Then if I refine my shapes, I'll be in a good place because I've worked out all these relationships. So that diagram that we had, it was in response to Aurelia's, I'm terrified of getting sick and having voice problems. Remember this? When I was talking about working from big to small? So these are shapes. Size of the shapes. So what happens is I'm just asking you to do that in your first session. And what happens is then your next session, your workload is smaller. And then this only takes, that's really quick. This is like your small shapes. This is the refined specific stuff. All you have to do is here. So if you do that, as you move forward, you got less work to do every time. Okay. And you can see what you're doing. So resist the desire to have like a tiny sharp something in your hand and do it with that because you're used to that. Because believe me, if we were painting a house and I had two of you and I gave one of you guys like a little paintbrush and I gave another one of you like a big roller, and I said, you each have to paint one of these walls in this room, you'd be very mad if you were the person who got the skinny little paintbrush, right? So this is a good way to match to the size of your shape. So I might break this down into a smaller piece when I get farther along. But for now, I can turn it on its side and I can go whoosh, 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 whoosh. And I can take the piece of paper towel and I can go whoosh, 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 whoosh. And all of a sudden I've filled like this big area really rapidly. And the only thing I have to do is try to get it basically the right shade of gray that seems to match for that area. And I'll do that all over my paper. And then I'll go to add shapes that are like not quite as big. But there's one big overall value to most things, right? So if you've got an object, you might have something that has like a really light part or really, you know, but most of the time you can kind of lay in one big overall shape and match that value. And then you can go from there. So cover your whole paper with big shapes, the big pieces of information. Remember to keep the charcoal on its side. Remember to use a paper towel and to rub. You don't want that look where the paper's showing through it. It looks like it has dots and stuff. You got to work it. Expect to have to work the charcoal. Not to put in details immediately, but to like make your areas of value, your shapes of value, clear and even. Because if your paper is showing through somewhere, it'll sort of compete with your highlights, right? You don't want to like rub away something like over here and get a nice meaningful highlight that says it's a shiny spot, and then just have paper showing through somewhere else. Am I making sense? Right? Everywhere you want the right shade of gray in place. And if all you concern yourself with in the start is big shapes of overall values, that's pretty cool. I mean, I can just sort of say, well, that's scary, the detail that's in there, but I know those are just smaller shapes of value, but I don't even have to do those yet. I just have to get the overall. So, okay, it's lighter than that thing over there, but it's not as light as this thing, and this thing is, you know, like you just start comparing those things and putting the right shade of gray in the right place. You'll find that it's very easy to see your, you know, really rich darks and to see your highlights that are really, really light. But you'll find that it's hard when it's subtle. When you have like a middle gray and then right next to it is another shape of middle gray, that'll be a little harder to see. And then there's an area that's really hard. I've just observed over and over and over that's hard. Can anybody tell me what it is? Like, I see you're thinking about it. Go ahead, Aurelia. What is the range that's hard?
Oh, no, I was just doing something else. Sorry.
Yeah. The range that's really hard, actually, you'll find this. I used to think like people used to just put stuff like, you know that cone and that sphere that you see in like the art school sort of setup. I used to think that was just because, but actually like, it's actually the lighter range. We have real trouble with that. We tend to jump to over contrast stuff, and we tend to really skip. If it's like in the subtle range of the value scale, we'll actually put it in a darker gray than we need to, you know? So then I find out, well, they spray paint these bottles, middle gray and light gray and like white and stuff, and they put them up in these still lifes in art school because we need to sort of tune our ability to read subtleties in values. And we have a tendency to make big leaps and get things too overly contrasty. Whatever you do, don't model all of your objects in the exact same range of values. Then they'll all look like they're made of the same thing. They'll look the same. Talk about the differences, get them matched. So if I have a thing that is metal, I have to use like really light lights right next to really dark darks. That's why it looks shiny. So if you look at like a piece of jewelry or anything you have that has, we say it has shine, well, how do I draw that? Well, the reason it looks that way is that it has really light shapes next to really dark shapes, and that's what makes it look like metallic. And then if you look at something that isn't shiny, I realize that like, oh, it's all got the same, like there's changes because this has wrinkles, but it's all in that far end of the value scale. It doesn't have any like light bits. And, you know, if I get something that's opaque, I don't have those kinds of contrasts right next to each other. And that's really what's going on. Things that are see-through are light in value, but then have really, really light lights on them. And that's how they look like a sort of like see-through. It can all be viewed that way. What shape do I see? How light or how dark? What shape do I see? How light or how dark? So I'm asking everybody to make a nice still life, to set it up, to concern themselves with lighting, to do thumbnail composition sketches, and then to transfer that composition with as minimal line work as you can do. Only what is necessary, only what you gotta have. Transfer that to an 18 by 24 page, and then your sole responsibility in the early session is the biggest shapes. Cover the entire page with the biggest major shapes, and what are those values? Lay in or mass in the major values, okay? And then rub them and work them and, you know, sort of get them sort of smooth and solid, right? so you can compare them. And then stay in that place for a while, and then we'll go from there, okay? So like the first thing you want to do is like that, and then the second thing you want to do is go to shapes that are slightly smaller that you see inside or sitting on or so forth. Okay, so any additional questions on this stuff?
So when so the mechanical eraser is much thinner than the square eraser, right? So you can
And it's harder. So this is good for small stuff. Or if sometimes with this, you rub and you rub and you rub, but you still want to get it lighter. That's when you break out that. This will probably get it lighter. After this is done, everything.
For finer details and higher contrast, you use the mechanical.
Yeah. And then this, when it gets really dirty, you can see I've already gotten like a lot of charcoal on it. What I can do is I can work it around and I can turn it in on itself and I can get a clean spot again. So it will pick up more than it was when it was. Eventually though, it'll get so saturated with charcoal dust that it'll just be like gone. That's why we have two of them, and you might use up those, I don't know. And I can move this around to make a point. I can keep it in a ball if I'm just like softening something. This is very handy because I can mold its shape to help me get the shape that I want, the shape that I see. And then also when it gets really dirty, I can do this, pull it out, fold that inside, and now it's ready to pick up again good. Right?
Why is mine already broken into pieces?
Let me see it. Hold it.
Like this?
Let me hold it up to your.
It's already broken into multiple pieces. I got two.
Where'd you get it? Did it come in a square?
When I try to fold it, it just naturally likes to break.
Okay, knead it. Work it like dough. Put those pieces back together, roll it into a ball, and then pull it until the inside is in the center, and then turn it on itself and see if you can't get a cleaner place.
Can you add some water to it to make it more sticky?
Do not do that.
Okay.
Do not do that. That will not that won't work well. Just work it with your fingers and pull it and silly putty it into a new shape.
Okay, I understand.
And if it gets dirty enough, there is a place where it'll just be shot. It'll just be, that's it, you know. You need a new one. Yeah.
I had a somewhat related question. I'm not sure if you mentioned this yet. How do you store these? Like, do you just put it in a box or something, or?
The kneaded eraser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, so it's fine as is?
It's
okay.
fine.
I just didn't want to like put it somewhere hard.
It won't like dry out and be, you know. What will ruin it is that eventually you'll have picked up so much charcoal with it that when you need it to find a clean spot, there just isn't any clean spot left. And you'll know when that happens. It'll feel less stretchy and gummy, and it'll just feel like, you know, yeah, but there's not anything, I mean, I suppose if you left it in the hot enough sun, it might do something, but otherwise, no, you just leave it sitting. Somebody else. Okay. So, line, anybody that hasn't sent me the line still life, send it over. If you're still resolving it, resolve it. Now, you're probably going to want to finish it up as soon as you can, or you want to rewatch this video, maybe, to remember all that kind of stuff and let go of the line work while you mass in the major shapes of value. Shapes of value, shapes of value. What shape, what value? What shape, what value? Keep it about those two questions. As you look, ask those two questions. It's one of those two things that will help you interpret it with your eye. Okay? All right, let me stop the share. All right. So everybody's still there? People that I don't see? The nice thumbs up there. A thumbs up emoji is more than sufficient. If you don't want to, appear before me again, that's fine. So think about all that. The approach, remember what to do. We're all about shape and value now, and we use our charcoal. Some notes. It's messy, okay? I would not wear not that anybody probably is in this COVID situation. We're probably, I'm wearing the same shorts I've had on for a week or something, nobody is putting on their best clothes, for this kind of thing, but please, there's no reason to get charcoal all over something nice. You may want to put down some sheets from your newsprint tablet to catch charcoal dust, or there's some grit that can come off of the kneaded eraser. Okay, if you have the desire to blow dust, believe it or not that you don't have to worry about this being some horribly toxic art material. It's not. But if you don't want to inhale any charcoal dust whatsoever, or you're afraid that you'll have a booger later that looks like your kneaded eraser or something, actually blowing is, when you blow, it actually kind of goes up and you actually will take in more of it that way. The best thing to do is to take your board over to a trash can and tap and let the dust just fall. If you got a lot of dust, so if you try to like wipe it up, you might just get a lot of smears. Sometimes just taking it and tapping and bumping and letting all your dust. Because sometimes people build up a lot when they're like applying a lot of charcoal because they're doing a lot of like, dark darks and stuff. If you have the clips that are holding the paper or the rubber band, move those to the absolute farthest edge. You may find that when you take away the clips, there's two shapes there where the clips were that you have to fill in. Or you might just want to not, you know what I mean? You might want to remove the rubber band and the clips and work on this sometime, that way. If you are getting a lot of dots, like you're rubbing the charcoal stick and you're really getting like, remember when you were a kid, you used to do rubbings, like, you take objects and you lay paper down and you do a rubbing, with a crayon or something. If it's starting to look like that and you're just getting texture, or put a few pieces of paper underneath it, or keep it on the tablet, so it has a cushion underneath it. There was something else along those lines that I was thinking. It just got away from me, but you definitely want paper towels. Or at least like when you do that first thing that I'm asking you to do and you're doing the big stuff and the areas are large and you're massing in this 18 by 24, definitely have a paper towel. And the art supply store, they sell like chamois cloths, for working with charcoal, and that's just sort of like the expensive paper towel or rag. Wash up. Good, try not there's always somebody who's getting it all over their face and everything like that. But if you like are getting charcoal all over, there are people who like put on gloves and that kind of thing, but it needn't be like that. It's an 18 by 24 drawing, and it's not like the day in which we like do giant work. This is vine. It comes in like, it looks like a stick or a twig off a branch. It's very light. If you use this, like it's soft, you might find if you use this, it's very nice, but you can almost like rub the whole thing away. It's real subtle. You might even want to use one of these for that, when I'm saying to do the minimal line work lay in to indicate where things are. You can use that. This is mostly like cool though, like when we get like figure models, that's gonna be really cool. You might play around with it. You can break it, soft, subtle stuff compared to your compressed stick, so if you don't need like really rich values and you just want to sort of like gently indicate stuff, you know what I mean? Vine can be nice for that, but don't get like surprised when you then rub it and it's almost like it's not there anymore, or it's almost all gone, because that's the nature of vine. If your paper is not particularly porous, and our paper is pretty slick and firm. Yeah. Two things, shapes, values. Okay. So mass everything in. If you want to show me work in progress, that's cool. Otherwise, somebody tell me what's happening next time on Wednesday. Who's got that calendar handy and can tell me what's on Wednesday's thing? Anybody?
It says we're doing a still life charcoal drawing.
Yeah, we're working on this some more, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anything else on there?
Also,
Sketchbook
also
open.
the sketchbook.
Does it say open?
Sketchbook to negative space.
Oh yeah,
Study.
two negative space studies. So like that hand on the last handout I sent where it had a negative space drawing where it was just like a reverse silhouette, you know, drawing the holes and not the things. We'll do some of those, right, in our sketchbook. You can do it with a pen or like something, you know, or really soft pencil. Basically, if everybody comes with their, you know, like you've done a layout, definitely have your still life set up, right? But if you're like massing in and stuff like that, and you want me to have a look, I can do that. But you know, we can go forward on this, right? I can give you a little more information, or I can like, you know, guide you forward. But believe me, you'll hear that reductive shape and value thing a lot. If it's the exact same still life as your previous one, actually looking at your drawing, Thomas, I think your still life, like that fish thing or whatever, you'd probably be fine, actually. As long as it's not like little bitty things, skinny things, or as long as you don't see a lot of contrast in it. If things seem too similar and you don't have enough range, because a lot of this is about getting the full range of values. Okay? Okay, great. Send me what you need to send me. Get things going, get started, all of that. I can't wait to see you put this into motion. Okay? And I will see everybody at 2:40 on Wednesday. Oh, Thomas, I've got your line drawing already. So there are some people who still have to send some things. So
You got mine, just to check, right?
when did you send it? Because I didn't do a lot, like if it was right before, how close to class was it?
I think I sent it yesterday.
Oh, well, I got it this morning. Okay. I'll double check, but if you sent it, I probably got it.
Okay,
I think so. I think so.
Okay, cool. All right, bye.
Bye.
So
Yeah.
you want us to finish the line drawing first if we haven't, right?
Yeah, if you're still working on that, resolve it. Yeah. All right. See you Wednesday.